Good afternoon, Global Genes community. Thank you for joining us for Good afternoon, Global Genes community. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Roslyn Daniels, and I'm president and publisher of BlackHealthMatters.com. Thanks so much for taking time to join us at Global Genes Live, a rare patient advocacy summit. We are excited for our upcoming session, ensuring inclusivity through organizational leadership. Again, my name is Roslyn Daniels, and I am the president and founder of Black Health Matters, and I will be your moderator for this session. Before we get everything kicked off, I wanted to review a few brief housekeeping notes. First of all attendees are currently muted by the moderator to reduce any interruptions. We encourage you to use your chat function in the On24 window for any questions you may have throughout this session, and the moderating team will present these questions to the speaker. To open the chat, please click on the blue chat button located on the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. If there are questions that are not able to be addressed by the speakers, or we run short on time, we will do our best to follow up after the program. Also, make sure to post your top takeaways and fun moments during the Global Genes Live on social media and tag at Global Genes for a chance to be featured on social media channels. The official event hashtag is hashtag 2020 GGS Summit. Again, hashtag 2020 GGS Summit. Finally, we encourage you all to participate as active listeners and take advantage of an opportunity to hear from leaders and experts here to ask questions of them. This program is your time to learn and find answers on critical challenges in rare disease research. I am now pleased to welcome our discussion leaders, Melissa Bryce-Gamble, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Global Foundation for Pernessa. I apologize if I mispronounced that disorders. Pernessa Seele, the CEO and founder of Balm and Gilead, and Dube, the CEO of Retrophin. They will each share a more complete background as we delve into the conversation. But for now, I'd like to invite Melissa to kick things off. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Roslyn. Thanks so much for moderating today.
My pleasure. Tell us about your journey.
So As Roslyn said, my name is Melissa Bryce-Gamble. I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Global Foundation for Paroxysmal Disorders. We are a 10-year-old nonprofit public charity based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we have about 500 patients on our patient registry right now, our patient directory. And we serve patients really around the world and their families. So our mission is to promote research on paroxysmal disorders and support those families, while also working on some advocacy initiatives to help move things forward in the advocacy world for our patient population. So I am also a rare caregiver for my daughter, Ginny. Ginny passed away about 5 years ago. She had a paroxysmal disorder. And we began our journey about 12 years ago now, when we began looking for her diagnosis. So after a 2-year diagnostic odyssey, we found that diagnosis. And shortly thereafter, along with a small group of parents, I helped form the Global Foundation for Paroxysmal Disorders. So that is me. Thanks for having me today.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Eric, we're going to go to you.
Thank you, Roslyn. I'm Eric Dube. I'm the president and CEO of Retrophin. We are a small biotech that's focused exclusively on rare disease. Our mission is to identify and develop and deliver therapies for rare and ultra-rare diseases. And I'm honored to be part of this important panel representing my colleagues at Retrophin, who many of us are personally impacted by rare disease. I myself am a 2-time rare cancer survivor, and I can speak for all of our employees that we are absolutely committed to addressing the challenges that we often face in rare disease for every patient that may be affected by a rare disease that we can help.
Excellent. And Pernessa. Are you all hearing Pernessa?
Okay. My name is Pernessa Seele, and I am the founder and CEO of the Balm in Gilead, a 32-year-old advocacy, faith-based African-American group. And our mission is to build the capacity of faith communities to be in the trenches of disease promotion, disease treatment, clinical trials. And our work in rare diseases is awareness to engage individuals who have rare diseases and to build trust, to build a bridge between individuals and biotech pharma organizations, and really understand and trust the space of rare disease.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So I'm going to actually throw the first question out to Eric. Eric, how did your involvement with diverse patient communities originate?
Well, I would say for our company, we recognize that our mission can only be fully filled if we're able to deliver innovation and diagnoses for every patient, including those that have been underserved by the pharmaceutical industry, the biotech industry, and the healthcare system. And I think in doing so, much of what we do is through listening to the stories of patients and their caregivers. And when I've heard, and my colleagues hear from many of you about your stories, we have to go beyond just the diagnosis or the treatment. What are the barriers that have gotten in the way? And when we speak to so many patients, we recognize that whether it's geography, ethnicity, age, or gender, that there are specific barriers to accessing information or clinical trials or diagnoses that we must work together in overcoming some of the biases and systemic barriers that exist. And that's been a very core part of what we're trying to do as part of this community in delivering innovation, but also in tackling some of the barriers that we see. And so that's something that has really driven us to be very active in addressing diversity and equity within rare disease.
Excellent, excellent. So as a company and industry leaders, what initially prompted your hands-on role, Eric, in ensuring outreach to patients, meaning all patients?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, again, it goes back to listening to the stories within the rare disease community, but also in looking at the demographics of whether it is clinical trial engagement or in registries or in the diagnostic odyssey that patients have. And when we look within certain diseases that may disproportionately affect certain communities, we're seeing, for example, within African American and Latinx communities that once diagnosed, there is worse outcomes in, for example, rare renal diseases because of some of these access barriers and the systemic biases that have existed. And so I think that's really when we saw that and we realized that there's so much more that we have to do to fully deliver the hope that a new therapy or diagnosis can provide. We have to work on some of these. But we're one company, and so part of what we need to do is to work together in addressing some of these. And I think that's really what has taken us on this journey and has reinforced our commitment to this mission for every patient within the rare disease community.
Excellent. Now, Pernessa, what we're hearing is that when you're trying to educate various populations about chronic disease, that trust is important. Do you have any recommendations on how to build trust with diverse patient communities?
Well, I think that it's thank you, Roslyn. I think that it's very important that when we work with companies that they're very clear and honest and transparent about why African Americans and other diverse populations do not trust. And we have to be able to really talk about the historical context of what brings us to these moments where you may have a rare disease, but you do not trust at the point of getting it in clinical trials. So it is important that you work with advocacy groups, like we work with faith-based organizations, we are advocacy, that can talk the language that individuals understand. They can talk the historical context to understand the culture on why we do not often get into these kinds of situations for trust. And we must build that trust upon being transparent with what we're talking about. We know that trust doesn't happen overnight, so it has to be a sustainable approach and a sustainable awareness campaign that will change the paradigm over time.
Excellent. So now, Melissa, on a rare disease like yours, how did your involvement with diverse patients originate? And please, could you just say a little bit more about the disease state itself?
Sure, absolutely. So I just want to make sure that I mentioned that I am certainly not an expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we are striving, and our organization is striving in that direction. So paroxysmal disorders impact all systems of the body. It's a rare terminal disease that can be diagnosed in childhood. And in fact, a newborn screening for this disease is now on the RUSC. So we are hoping to get more patients in the coming years. So how did our organization get started in our diversity and inclusion work? As I mentioned, we're about 10 years old, and we had the good fortune of some of our very early on board members, family members, caregivers of patients with paroxysmal disorders, really saying, this is an issue. And we started our board as with all parents and caregivers of patients. So, it naturally grew that our board members were concerned about this. And because they were patients, they were caregivers in this space. And so some of the things that we've done is, as our organization has grown, we've really looked at our board composition, which I think is something that patient advocacy groups can do. It's a fairly easy thing to work into your board meetings, and really look at, who is on your board. So as I mentioned, we started out with parents. As the organization grew, we knew we needed some professional guidance as well. But as we started to add that, we began to see that we needed more parents, and we needed more diverse parents as well, so that we were really reflective of what our patient population looked like. And so that board matrix has been really important for our organization to make sure that we're filling not only professional areas of expertise that we need help in, but also, making sure that our families' voices are heard. The voice of the patient is heard consistently in the organization and at the decision-making level. And then one other piece that we've implemented earlier this year, was our diversity committee. And that has been crucially important as this year has been a rather tumultuous, and getting insight from those members of that committee has been really important as we've navigated some of the things that have been going on in the world this year. And then finally, we have, our board has we have this board matrix, we have a diversity committee. Our board has really tried to hone in on what are the things that are going to help make our organization more diverse. So we have some goals set to have diverse attendance at our in-person events. And we really feel like, and of course we haven't had any of those in 2020, but we feel like in the coming years, getting our families involved and engaged and coming to our in-person events is one of the best ways that we can engage them over the long haul. Because if they come to an in-person event, usually they're hooked from then on. And
so can you just speak to me about how you are broadcasting so that you can meet your goals? How are you broadcasting the fact that you're having these types of programs?
Yes. So great question. So we are just beginning here in 2020. And we actually have some family navigators that are helping to reach out to those families. So making sure that they know that we're here, and that we have resources that we can be helpful. And really what it has been is one-to-one communication and relationship building. And we found
can I just ask you, are they raising their hands, or is it difficult to identify this diverse patient community? Or do you have experts that just have radar that can just take you to them?
If only that were the case, right? So I wish we had radar. That would be great. But we really do a lot of digging, actually. So one of the things that we've started doing is just some really, a lot of internet searching, a lot of searching on blogs, within social media, Facebook groups specifically, to help find those patients. As I mentioned, newborn screening is happening, and we're working on diversifying our efforts among the different states that are doing newborn screening to help find those patients quickly, and get them looped in with our organization.
Interesting. Excellent. Okay. So, Eric, I know from working closely with your advocacy teams at Retrophin that you continue to be very hands-on in all of your company's health equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. Can you share advice for other companies striving to serve this as the same kind of champion for the rare disease community? And also, if you have a moment, could you share some of the campaigns that you felt were really effective in reaching diverse populations?
Okay, thank you, Roslyn. So yes, it is very important to not just our patient advocacy organization, but to me and to the rest of the leaders within the company. It's really important that we are part of the solution in tackling some of the healthcare inequities that we see. It all starts with us listening. I think, as Melissa said, we're not experts, but we have to be seen as having the right intent. And I think that starts with listening. Rather than coming in and saying, we have a clinical trial for you, would you like to enroll in this clinical trial? That, to me, is where we would have a misstep in building trust and really understanding what the challenges and barriers have been to date within, for example, communities of color. So it starts again with listening, making sure that we don't see patients as patients or subjects, but as partners in helping us make the right decisions, whether it's in a clinical trial design, whether it's in the type of education or support that we help to provide. And so, this is a constant conversation that we have in the organization to make sure that we're bringing in that voice and those stories. Our organization also has an individual who is dedicated exclusively to helping to map the patient odyssey. And it's not just one odyssey. It's what are the odysseys that might be different in communities of color so that we have the opportunity to engage with them differently. And one of the very important initiatives that we're part of that was started by the Black Women's Health Imperative is the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition. This is a coalition that was started at the beginning of this year that really helped to address what we believed was an opportunity across the rare disease community, which is fundamentally on patient empowerment. We know that so much of the progress that we've seen within rare disease has been through empowering patients and caregivers and seeing them as partners and of sources of insight for the industry, for regulators, for policymakers. And so this Rare Disease Diversity Coalition is to lift those stories and that voice and the needs of communities of color that are impacted by rare disease. And so it's comprised of patient and healthcare leaders such as the National Medical Association, Global Genes, NORD, and other areas, really to focus on how do we close the diagnostic gaps that exist specifically within communities of color affected by rare disease, or in increasing engagement with clinical trials, or in getting researchers and investigators of color to engage within rare disease. And what is the policy agenda to be able to tackle some of these health care inequities? So this, I think, is its early days, but it's very exciting to see some of the foremost leaders within healthcare and within rare disease and with specifically within Black, Latinx, and Asian Pacific Islanders within the U.S. for us to be able to work together on some of these challenges. So that's probably one of the biggest initiatives that we have. And we, call on other leaders and other industry partners to engage in this so that we can all work together in that end.
No, excellent. That sounds exciting. I know they do great work, the Black Women's Health Imperative. So, Pernessa, what would you tell someone who is looking to increase diversity in terms of patient populations and also organization, in terms of the organization? If you were to kind of offer some best practices from where you sit, what would you ask them to kind of think about in lining up their strategy?
Well, thank you, Roz. And I want to say to Eric that the Rare Disease Diverse Coalition, the Balm in Gilead, is also sitting on that coalition. And it is a very unique and a very wonderful coalition, wonderful in terms of the mission of the coalition to bring diverse groups together to really look at these policies, look at strategies that really focus on diversity, inclusion, and equity. I would say, Ross, your question, I would say that we really need to continue these kinds of conversations where we're really intentionally thinking about, bringing diverse communities to the table. Because oftentimes we are talking, but we're not actually doing. And I know this group, we enjoy working in this space of just learning from each other in terms of it's not a hit or miss. It is a long-term, sustainable intentionality of opening the doors to diversity, inclusion, and equity. It is also like the coalition that Eric is mentioning, that we bring diverse people to the table who have access to the individual. Because at the end of the day, we're really clear that we want people to really come into the rare disease space in terms of clinical studies or treatment. So we have to address all of the different things, the policies, the community, the culture. And when we talk about diversity, I want to focus on this for a minute, but not too much. Diversity is not a monolithic conversation. We throw this word diversity around, but in diversity are individual populations and individual groups that must be addressed in an individual way. So when we say diversity, who are you actually talking about? Are you talking about the African American community? Are you talking about the Latino community? Are you talking about the Native American community? Are you talking about the Asian Pacific Islanders? Each one of these cultures require their own community strategy. It's not just one big melting pot of diversity, inclusion, equity, but every population, every diverse population requires a strategic thinking and strategic planning.
Should we even say diversity, or should we talk more in terms of inclusivity? What is the best way to term what we're discussing and what our goals are?
Well, I think we should, I agree with you in terms of inclusivity, that word. Yes, inclusion is the word that I would use more, because diversity really kinds of, that word says, oh yeah, we're dealing with diversity, but what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that we have everybody at the table? But we're not really going deep in terms of how do we reach the diverse of including different cultures in our programs, in our research, in our treatment. So I think inclusive is definitely a more exact word than the broader conversation around diversity.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Did anyone else from our panel wanted to weigh in on this?
This is Melissa Bryce-Gamble. Just to say, I agree with that focus on inclusion. One of the things that we have been doing with the GFPD that I think Pernessa kind of alluded to is making sure that some of our materials for patients are available in lots of different languages. So that has been a bit of a challenge because we're dealing with, very specific medical terminology, and making sure that we're getting good translations of documents is something that we've been working on. Additionally, looking at some of those groups that may have not been served by our organization in the past, but are now emerging patient groups as diagnosis becomes better. So One of those groups that sticks out in my mind is our young adult group that had not previously been diagnosed with a paroxysmal disorder, but are now later, as whole exome sequencing is becoming more common, getting diagnoses later in life and needing that support. So, making sure that we're including them in all of our organizational, decision making, in communication, in having opportunities, unique opportunities for them to connect, because they may not feel like they fit in with a family that has a very, very, very sick young child, if they're an adult that has just received this crazy diagnosis. So making sure that we, have a lot of different ways that we can connect and engage with people, I think is important.
Understood. Now, can I just ask, and I'll throw this out to the panel, how do you choose the right partner to engage with your interest in inclusivity? How do you evaluate that?
Maybe, Roslyn, I'll go while Pernessa and Melissa are reflecting. I'd say for us, we needed to have partners that are committed to diversity, inclusion, and I'd also add equity here as well, because we need to have equitable access to healthcare. And I think also making sure that we have partners who are able, for us in particular, to reach the communities that we want at the table for us to be able to listen to and learn from and to work with. And so, for us, it is very much about having a broad group of partners externally, so that we as a biotech company can be as informed as possible about the different aspects of the rare disease community that we serve. And so I think for us, we have to be as inclusive as possible. One aspect, for example, is in disability. So much of what we try to do in our work is in clinical development. But if it requires very regular travel to a clinical trial site or to a specialist, we have to do better. And I think COVID in so many ways is forcing us broadly as kind of aspects of healthcare to change what we do, whether it's in having home visits, whether it's in using telehealth, or whether it's in better engaging communities of color in addressing some of the healthcare inequities that they face. And so to me, I know that's a very long answer, but we have to be very inclusive to really understand what are the challenges that we face here.
If I could follow that up with, in terms of choosing partners, I think choosing partners is important, but also developing the relationships over the long term is really important. As a pharmaceutical company, it's not ideal to come in at the very last minute trying to recruit patients. Building those relationships over the long term, I think, is what we're trying to do here, and that works with inclusion, that works with diversity, and it works with equity. Building those relationships, I think, is really the key here.
No, I agree. No, that makes all the sense. So are you feeling a sense of urgency because we are in COVID and the nation is suffering from the pandemic of racism? Is there a sense of urgency in what we're doing, or are we managing just taking one day at a time? Who'd like to answer that?
Well, for the Balm and Gilead, of course, we feel a sense of urgency around everything. COVID and HIV, COVID and rare disease, COVID and diabetes. I think there is definitely a sense of urgency, and I think that this conversation is critical in this time when the nation is talking about systematic racism. You know, to kind of go back to the partnership piece, when we're looking for partners, Roz, we are looking at the commitment and the historical context of our partners. What has been the action, not just the conversation, but has there been action, any action that we can look at and say, oh, well, they did this, they said this, and they did this. They said this, and they did this. Because oftentimes we get in relationships with partners, and the point is, the focus is to get partners. The focus is not to to move forward once we get those partners. So we're constantly starting over, or what came out of that coalition, or what came out of that partnership. Oh, the objective really was just to get the inclusiveness of the partner, not necessarily to go to the next level. So I think there is a definite urgency, and the climate of our country even puts more of an urgency for this time.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Melissa, go ahead.
No, you go.
I think there is a sense of urgency, and there must. I mean, there is so much uncertainty that I hear personally from many of the patient advocacy leaders that we work with. The level of uncertainty with regard to the COVID pandemic, with regard to changes within healthcare,
yes.
access to insurance, the
election
issue.
year.
That's right, and the issues that we see are only even more acute within the African American communities, and the lack of trust within the healthcare system. There must be a sense of urgency, but I think the only way to measure that sense of urgency is through others seeing your actions, as Pernessa said, and I think as leaders across this arena, holding themselves and their organizations accountable for doing better. And I think that's where we'll ultimately see whether there is a sense of urgency.
And what I was going to say, Eric, is that, the urgency that I'm seeing within our community is really the strain on the caregivers that is happening during this time. And the fact that, families are either not having nursing care, or in some cases are having difficulty accessing medical supplies, medications that they may need. And I think those kinds of challenges that have been brought on by COVID are really shining a light, I think, on some of the daily challenges that rare disease patients face on a daily basis. So this is not new for rare disease patients, but it is bubbling up to the surface. It's becoming more pronounced because of lack of shortages and lack of help for caregivers. So that's the urgency I'm seeing, and it's our job to help make that known, to use our voices and make sure that those disparities are being seen and addressed in the future and now.
No, absolutely. And that's where you really, really need your resources when you're in a situation like that. You want to be able to know that there are communities and people and places where you can go that will help lift you up when you're confronted with that type of thing. So that makes a lot of sense. How can accountability as an organization and leader be an important tool for engaging diverse and underserved populations? What does accountability on these issues look like? I'm going to throw that out to the three of you.
So action, that's been said here today quite a bit. Seeing our boards and committees become more diverse, seeing that we, have families and patients engaged from all over the world. That should be what we're looking at. That should be, the accountability. That should be exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah. The thing I would add is, for us as an organization, it's the accountability for us in our actions, in where we invest our resources, and also I think how we are as an organization internally. We've got to measure: are we an inclusive organization? Are we reaching the intended parts of the community that may be underserved? And I think that it all will come down for us to measurement, and also in hearing from the rare disease community, and specifically, I think in this instance, communities of color, whether we are doing enough, moving the needle, and are part of making this a more equitable space. And I think also one aspect of accountability, again, will be my plea to other industry partners to join in really moving beyond just the words into action and investment to address these challenges.
Accountability for us, Roz, is really staying the course, staying the course. Because as an African American organization, and understanding, why it's so critical that we really reach our community and our communities engaged in these processes. It's important for those of us who are leaders, those of us who have these partnerships with these phenomenal groups, that we stay the course, because sometimes the process of systematic racism within corporations, systematic racisms at these tables, really dismantle the process. So for us, the accountability really is staying the course, because the end game is so critical for us that we really get more diversity and inclusion into rare diseases.
I agree with you. And then, of course, for us, because we are a solution provider for industry, is that we continue to innovate and that we continue to work towards excellence in all that we do. The time is really kind of come so quickly. So it looks like we are going to be wrapping up. So I have a few minutes for you all, just if there were some parting response or comments that you would just like to share with the audience as you all blaze a path for health equity and inclusivity.
I would just say that even the smallest patient advocacy groups can do this. It's possible. I'm always happy to be a resource and share things that we've learned, sometimes the hard way, as we move forward. So thank you.
Wonderful.
I would like to say that in parting that inclusion, equity, and diversity begins with you. When you're starting this conversation, look around, and our partners, those who want to be inclusive, those who want to diverse, must begin to look like what they say they want. I think that is where we begin, and I am very happy to have been invited to be a part of this very important conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Eric, we'll close with you.
Yes, Pernessa, I would agree completely with what you've said. We need to make sure that the voices are at the table for those that may not feel that they have been in the past. And that is reflected at what happens within organizations, whether it's patient advocacy organizations, life science partners, and healthcare providers. We need to make sure that there is a diversity there, and that we share our stories, because that is what drives action, I believe, and that's what will drive change.
Well said. Well, again, thank you so much, Melissa, Pernessa, and Eric, for leading a great discussion, and thank you so much for your great work. I'm Roslyn Daniels. It's been a pleasure to be here. Stay well.